The year is 1914. Across the Atlantic, Americans are enjoying an unprecedented era of peace and prosperity. The frontier has been tamed, industry booms, and the future gleams with the promise of progress. Europe, however, is a simmering cauldron, a continent of ancient empires, new nations, and tangled alliances, teetering on the precipice of a conflict that would shatter its very foundations and drag the world into an abyss unlike any seen before. This isn't just a story of kings and empires. It's a tale of human ambition, fear, and the catastrophic domino effect of seemingly isolated events. Imagine a grand opera. Its stage set with opulent palaces, bustling industrial cities, and quiet farming villages. The curtain is about to rise, but the drama has been building for decades, even centuries in the wings. For Americans, the seeds of this European cataclysm might seem distant, abstract, but understanding them is crucial to grasping why, eventually, the United States would find itself drawn into the global maelstrom. Our story doesn't begin with a bang, but with a slow, relentless grind of forces that shaped the early 20th century. The age of empires and the scramble for the world. For centuries, European powers had carved up the globe, building vast colonial empires that fueled their economies and projected their influence. Great Britain, with its massive navy, boasted an empire where the sun never set. France held sway over vast swaths of Africa and Indochina. Even smaller nations like Belgium and the Netherlands had their colonial possessions. Then there was Germany, a relative newcomer to the imperial game. Unified only in 1871 under the iron fist of Otto von Bismarck, Germany had rapidly industrialized, becoming an economic and military powerhouse, but it felt cheated, arriving late to the colonial feast. Kaiser Wilhelm II, a grandson of Queen Victoria, was an ambitious, often impulsive leader who dreamed of a place in the sun for Germany, commensurate with its growing power. This ambition clashed directly with the established colonial powers, especially Britain and France, fostering deep resentment and a fierce naval arms race. The alliance system, a web of promises and peril. Bismarck, a master of realpolitik, understood the precarious balance of power in Europe. He famously remarked that the whole of the Balkans isn't worth the bones of a single Pomeranian grenadier. His goal after German unification was to keep France isolated and prevent a two-front war. He wove a complex web of defensive alliances. The Dual Alliance, 1879, Triple Alliance, 1882. Germany and Austria-Hungary formed a defensive pact. Italy later joined, completing the Triple Alliance. This alliance aimed to counter potential threats, particularly from Russia and France. The Reinsurance Treaty, 1887, a secret agreement between Germany and Russia ensuring neutrality if either went to war with a third great power, unless Germany attacked France or Russia attacked Austria-Hungary. When Kaiser Wilhelm II dismissed Bismarck in 1890, the new leadership allowed the Reinsurance Treaty to lapse. This was a monumental mistake. Russia, feeling exposed, began looking for new partners. The Entente Cordiale and the Triple Entente, balancing the scales. Alarmed by Germany's growing naval power and aggressive foreign policy, other European nations began to draw closer. Franco-Russian Alliance, 1894. France, eager to break its isolation, and Russia, now without a German treaty, formed a military alliance. This was precisely the two-front nightmare Bismarck had sought to avoid. The Entente Cordiale, 1904, a series of agreements between Great Britain and France. It wasn't a formal military alliance, but it settled colonial disputes and signaled a significant warming of relations, effectively ending centuries of rivalry. For Britain, Germany's naval buildup and its challenging of British global supremacy were increasingly seen as the primary threat. Anglo-Russian Entente, 1907. Britain and Russia settled their own colonial rivalries, the Great Game in Central Asia. These three agreements, the Franco-Russian Alliance, the Entente Cordiale, and the Anglo-Russian Entente, created the Triple Entente, effectively encircling the Triple Alliance: Germany, Austria-Hungary, Italy, though Italy's commitment would prove shaky. Europe was now divided into two armed camps, each sworn to defend the other, creating a dangerous trap where a localized conflict could quickly escalate into a global war. Militarism, the cult of the army. Another critical factor was the pervasive militarism that gripped Europe. Military spending soared, armies grew to unprecedented sizes thanks to conscription, and generals gained immense political influence. The general staffs of each nation developed elaborate war plans, meticulously detailing troop movements, railway timetables, and offensive strategies. These plans often assumed a rapid, decisive victory and left little room for diplomacy or de-escalation once set in motion. Germany's Schlieffen Plan, perhaps the most famous and ultimately fatal of these plans, called for a swift, overwhelming invasion of France through neutral Belgium to capture Paris, thus avoiding a prolonged two-front war with France and Russia. The assumption was that Russia would mobilize slowly. This plan, once activated, made a general European war almost inevitable. The belief in the efficacy of military force, the constant readiness for war, and the glorification of military service created a climate where conflict seemed not just possible, but perhaps even desirable in some quarters, a way to cleanse society or assert national honor.
Nationalism, a double-edged sword, the fervent belief in the superiority and unique identity of one's nation, was a powerful force across Europe. It could be unifying, forging new nations like Germany and Italy, but it could also be deeply divisive, fueling rivalries and irredentist claims, demands for territories inhabited by people of one's own nationality but controlled by another state. Pan-Slavism. In Eastern Europe, Russia promoted Pan-Slavism, the idea that it was the protector of all Slavic peoples, including those in the Austro-Hungarian and Ottoman empires. This deeply worried Austria-Hungary, which had a significant Slavic population, Serbs, Croats, Czechs, Poles, etc., and viewed Russian influence in the Balkans as a direct threat to its existence. A particularly potent form of nationalism emerged in the Kingdom of Serbia, which dreamed of uniting all South Slavs into a greater Serbia. This ambition directly challenged Austria-Hungary's control over Bosnia and Herzegovina, provinces with large Serb populations that Austria-Hungary had annexed in 1908. This annexation, known as the Bosnian Crisis, further inflamed Serbian nationalist passions and heightened tensions with Vienna. For decades, the Ottoman Empire, the sick man of Europe, had been in decline, its territories in the Balkans gradually breaking away to form new independent states like Greece, Bulgaria, Romania, and Serbia. This power vacuum created intense rivalry between Austria-Hungary and Russia, both seeking to expand their influence in the region. The Balkans became a powder keg, a region rife with ethnic tensions, nationalist aspirations, and competing imperial interests. Small wars, like the Balkan Wars of 1912 to 1913, further destabilized the region, strengthening Serbia and making it even more defiant toward Austria-Hungary. It was clear that any major spark here could ignite a broader conflagration. On June 28, 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, and his wife, Sophie, arrived in Sarajevo, the capital of Bosnia. Their visit, on a highly symbolic date for Serbian nationalists, the anniversary of the Battle of Kosovo in 1389, a pivotal moment in Serbian history, was seen as a deliberate provocation by many Serbs. a group of Bosnian Serb nationalists trained and supplied by a secret Serbian military society called the Black Hand plotted to assassinate the Archduke. After a failed attempt earlier in the day, fate intervened in a chilling manner. The Archduke's motorcar took a wrong turn, bringing his car to a halt directly in front of Gavrilo Princip, a 19-year-old Bosnian Serb student and Black Hand member. Princip seized the moment, firing 2 shots. One fatally wounded Sophie, the other struck Franz Ferdinand in the neck, killing him. The assassination sent shockwaves across Europe. For Austria-Hungary, it was the ultimate insult, an act of terrorism supported by its perpetually troublesome neighbor, Serbia. This was an opportunity, many in Vienna believed, to finally crush Serbian nationalism and reassert imperial authority in the Balkans. The July Crisis, a month of miscalculations and missed opportunities. What followed was a terrifying month of diplomatic blunders, miscalculations, and rapidly escalating tensions, known as the July Crisis. Austria-Hungary, unwilling to act alone against Serbia for fear of Russian intervention, sought assurances from its powerful ally, Germany. Kaiser Wilhelm II and his chancellor, Theobald Butman-Hollweg, gave Austria-Hungary a blank check, essentially promising unconditional support for whatever action Vienna chose to take against Serbia. This German assurance was a critical turning point, emboldening Austria-Hungary and signaling to Russia that Germany was prepared to back its ally, even at the risk of war. Germany gambled that Russia wouldn't intervene, or that if it did, the resulting war would be localized and quick. July 23rd. With German backing, Austria-Hungary issued an extraordinarily harsh ultimatum to Serbia. It contained 10 demands, many of which would have effectively ended Serbian sovereignty, for example, allowing Austrian officials to investigate the assassination on Serbian soil. Serbia had 48 hours to respond. July 25th. Serbia, though accepting most of the ultimatum's demands, rejected one key point, allowing Austrian officials to participate in investigations in Serbia. This partial rejection was enough for Austria-Hungary.
July 28th. Austria-Hungary declares war on Serbia. This immediately sets the alliance system in motion. July 29th through 30th. Russia, seeing itself as the protector of Slavic peoples and fearing Austro-Hungarian expansion, orders a partial mobilization, then a full general mobilization of its vast army. This is a crucial moment. Russia's mobilization signals to Germany that it is preparing for war, which triggers Germany's own war plans. August 1st. Germany, viewing Russia's mobilization as an act of war, declares war on Russia. France, bound by its alliance with Russia, begins its own mobilization. August 3rd. Germany declares war on France. Crucially, to execute the Schlieffen Plan, Germany demands free passage for its troops through neutral Belgium. August 4th. Germany invades Belgium. This act, violating Belgium's neutrality, guaranteed by an 1839 treaty to which Britain was a signatory, provides Britain with a clear casus belli. Great Britain declares war on Germany. Within a week, Europe was engulfed in a war that most believed would be short, perhaps lasting only a few months. Flags waved, crowds cheered, and young men eagerly flocked to recruiting stations, filled with patriotic fervor and the romanticized notion of glorious combat. They had no idea they were marching into a nightmare of unprecedented scale and brutality. No single cause, but a confluence of destructive forces. So why did World War I happen? It wasn't a single cause, but a tragic confluence of interconnected factors, each amplifying the others. Militarism, the relentless arms race,
the glorification of military power, and the inflexible war plans that made de-escalation almost impossible. The rigid, interlocking alliance system meant that a conflict between two nations automatically dragged in many others, transforming a regional dispute into a continent-wide war. The competition for colonies and global influence created deep-seated rivalries and heightened tensions. The fervent, often aggressive desire for national self-determination and the belief in national superiority, fueling ethnic conflicts in the Balkans and contributing to a willingness to go to war for national honor. The spark in Sarajevo, while not the root cause, was the immediate catalyst that ignited the powder keg. Lack of effective diplomacy. During the July crisis, there was a shocking failure of international diplomacy. Leaders seemed trapped by their military timetables and alliance obligations, unable or unwilling to find a peaceful resolution. Misinformation, misjudgment of intentions, and the belief that the other side would back down all played a part. The blank check. Germany's unconditional support for Austria-Hungary empowered Vienna to pursue an aggressive course that it might otherwise have hesitated to take. For the United States, watching across the ocean, the initial reaction was a desire for neutrality. President Woodrow Wilson declared that the U.S. must be impartial in thought as well as in action. But the forces unleashed in Europe would prove too powerful to ignore, eventually drawing America into the global conflagration, forever changing its place in the world. The grand opera had begun, and its tragic chorus would echo for generations.